Okay, we have quorum. So it's 4 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order, and I will look to committee for disclosures of pecuniary interest. And I'm not seeing any. So we have one consent item. It's the Age-Friendly London report, and I'm wondering if committee members have any questions or comments on that report. I'm actually going to go to staff, to Ms. Smith, to see, just for a quick highlight of the report, because I think it's worth talking about.
Sure, thanks, and through the chair. So we're excited to share with you. We do this every year. It's our annual update on our Age-Friendly London network. And I have Michelle with me. And Michelle actually just got back last week. She was in Toronto attending the International Federation on Aging. And we were invited to do 2 presentations. So it's really exciting to see that London still continues to be a leader in Canada and internationally around age friendliness. So I'm going to turn it over to her because she's our staff champion and leader in age friendly. And just to give you just 2 or 3 highlights of what she and her network have accomplished over the past 12 months.
Thanks. Welcome, Michelle. Go ahead.
Thank you, Cheryl. Through the chair, it has been an exciting year for the Age-Friendly London Network. In March of 2018, as we all know, the City of London received the inaugural Ontario Age-Friendly Community Recognition Award. We have also recently joined a new World Health Organization initiative called the Age-Friendly Mentorship Program, where London will be providing guidance to another community that's just beginning their age-friendly journey. So we've recently been matched with West Cheshire in the UK. So we're very excited about that. Over the past year, the 8 working groups of the Age-Friendly Network held over 80 meetings and volunteered in total over 8,000 hours. And this included attending meetings, conducting research, holding events, giving presentations, supervising students, and many other activities. Some projects that the working groups completed in year 1 include organizing and hosting our first older adult volunteer fair in May of 2018, creating educational workshops for seniors on home adaptation and modification options, creating an inventory of recreational assistive devices that are available in the community, and hosting the Age-Friendly London Conference, which was attended by 350 older adults and 50 exhibitors. Some projects that the groups are working on in year 2 include developing a guide for builders and planners on the design needs of older adults that support aging in place, implementing a public awareness campaign such as Everyday Hero to share positive stories about older adults, and hosting seminars with employers, support agencies, and mature job seekers to share our experience works to fact sheets and offer tips, best practices, and employment supports for older adults. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the members of the Age-Friendly London Network, particularly the older adults who volunteer their time, our City of London champions who sit on the 8 working groups, and the many senior-serving organizations, businesses, and other members of our community that dedicate their time, expertise, and resources to this work. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Any comments or questions from committee? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just accolades. I mean, really the work that we do as a city under your leadership with your team is really remarkable. I always enjoy attending the annual event, the day-long event, and see hundreds and hundreds of our seniors coming together, sharing and learning, and just really enjoying an excellent quality of life. And you can tell from the smiles on their face, from the excitement that they have that day, how important these programs are to them as well. And so when we say we're an age-friendly city, I think that the proof is really in this report and in the work that's being done every single day. So thank you very much for your work.
Great. Thanks very much. From me as well, thank you. I know that our population in London, we're aging faster than the provincial average, for sure. I'm not sure about the national. So a lot of great initiatives. And I know age-friendly means friendly to all age ages in the City of London. And I know that things that affect the elderly will eventually affect all of us and also affect people that may not be elderly. They may have some of the same issues, but all just the idea of socialization and having activities and events and things to do in the city. It's just a great thing for London, and I think you should be very proud of your work, so thank you very much. And with that, I'll look for a motion. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by the mayor, and we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And that's perfect timing because we have a timed item not to be heard before 4:05, and we have a delegation from Mr. John Pear, and you can make your way up to the microphone.
So the reason why I'm here is because the fact that,
Sorry, sir, can you please pick up the mic? It's just so that it gets caught. Thanks.
so the reason why I'm here is because of the fact that the LMHC board deals with our most vulnerable population in the city. The London for All plan talks about elevating people to be on boards and committees that are currently living the experience. Passive experience is totally relevant to what's going on, but we need people that are on the ground, that are living the experience, knowing what's going to happen. For example, there's a big fire in Limberlost today. So a lot of tenants seen what was going on, seen the firefighters there, police and everything else. That scares people that are tenants. So we need somebody there that are living the experience, talking to the board, that's on the board, representing tenants. I know that LMAC has said that they're going to have tenant advisory committees and things like that, but we need something that's expanding the board of LMAC to be with the tenants on the board. So that's what my request is, to be following with the London for All plan and having people on the board and committee.
Are there any questions or comments from committee members? So I know I've spoken with a couple of board members from LMHC. What I've learned from them is that they currently do have some new members of the board that have lived experience, having lived in social housing. And they also, with their new strategic plan that they didn't have in the past, but they've just come with a new strategic plan, their board structure is changing. So they have their regular board, and they also have now, or are setting up, subcommittees. And some of these subcommittees will include current members or current residents of LMHC housing. So they will have that direct link and direct connection to the board from the LMHC. So if you could, I'm wondering if that is good
Well,
for you, meets your needs, or addresses some of the concerns that you have.
Well, as council, I know that you appoint people to the board. And so therefore, when you're canvassing for the upcoming election, recruit people, find people that you're talking to out in the community and say, would you be interested in doing this if you're dealing with a site that deals with LMAC tenants? Try to mentor them. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Pierre. So I'll look for a motion from committee. Mr. Mayor?
Really, my motion is to receive.
So we have a motion to receive the delegation, and I'll need a second from Councillor Armstrong, so we can vote. Councillor Squire has indicated that he's voting yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for your delegation, Mr. Pierre. And before I go any further, my sincere apologies. I neglected to do something that I should have done at the very beginning of the meeting. And I just want to make the announcement that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Thank you. And so with that, we can move on to item number 3.2, which is the 7th report of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. And we have a delegation for that report from Mr. Cairns.
Hi there. My name is Michael Cairns. Chair, thank you very much for letting me speak today. I just wanted to speak to you guys today specifically about the outdoor event guide. Specifically motion 4.1 from the 7th report of the Accessibility Committee. So it states that Municipal Council be requested to fully endorse the entire outdoor event guide and require that all events held on city-owned land be required to implement all points. So a bit of history here. This is a guide that was developed by our committee over 10 years ago that is currently provided by the city to people putting on outdoor events on city-owned parks and spaces. As of now, it is just suggestions for groups to help make their events accessible. A couple years ago, members of our committee were approached by many different people in our community letting us know that some events were not accessible to them. So we're talking large festivals or music events. So we undertook the process of updating the guide, providing new recommendations to help make events more accommodating and accessible. And some of the updates we requested were, for example, with ticketing. There's what's called the Access 2 card that's currently employed by or used by the City of London and also used by Cineplex. Just as someone requires an attendant or someone to help come with them, they don't have to pay 2 forms of admission. Another one is just providing a quiet space or in and out privileges. This is helpful to attendees who may have mental health issues, sensory issues, or fatigue issues. And these areas can also serve as a welcome respite for service animals or nursing mothers. Also with seating, signage, parking, and washrooms. So we presented these updates to this committee, or went through the motions on May 24th of 2017, passed full council on May 30th. And we were lucky to have city staff come to speak to us about this on June 28th of this year, advising us that they had updated all points that we had requested on the recommended guide. And I asked what steps we would need to make these not just recommendations, but mandatory. And they advised that we have to come to council and get you guys to sign off on it. So what I'm here today is asking is if we can move forward on this. The guide that I came up with, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert at this by any means, if we can just put it all forward or if we can find some kind of compromise or somehow we can make this guide and events more accessible, that's all. So thank you.
Councillor Squire, would you like to speak first, or should I see that staff has indicated that they would like to address it as well? Okay, go ahead.
I think it's entirely appropriate that we move ahead, but I would say the appropriate way to do that is refer this matter to staff to come back to us with a report, because there may be budget implications, there may be legal implications of requiring people who rent property to do something, and I think to be responsible, I think certainly what council should do is listen to what you said. You make some great points, but let's get a fulsome report back to tell us what we can and can't do, and the budgetary implications of some of these things. So I'd be happy to move that motion at the appropriate time.
I'm sure you probably took the words out of Mr. Stafford's mouth, but go ahead, Mr. Stafford.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. And our staff has worked with the committee, and we certainly agree with a lot of the ideas that are going forward with the guide, and as they suggested, it's been a suggestion to the event holders. But as Councillor Squire mentions, we should have another more thorough look and just make sure of where we're at, what we can do, and what some of the timelines and guidelines and some of the implications are. So just have a more thorough view to go for the full endorsement. And as Mr. Cairns talks about, it's, should we do all of it, some of it? most of it, and I think that's what we just need to fall back and make sure that we can say, let's do 90% of it. Some of these are suggestions, some of them are mandatory, and bring it back with that kind of information, I think. And we can set some timelines on that. We don't want this to be forever, you know, for next event season. I think we have one or two major events left for this season. So if we have it ready for next event season, I think that's appropriate.
Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, and thank you for the delegation. Just a question, was your vision that this would be, I know we're going to send it to staff for some comment, report back, and you're looking to be a little bit flexible here, but was the vision that this would be for all outdoor events or for significant outdoor events? Do you see a difference between like a neighborhood street party and a Victoria Park festival, for example? So just so I can kind of grasp the scope that you're looking at.
What we're trying to do is basically on city-owned property that city owns. But again, we're not trying to make anybody rents a barbecue in Springbank Park to have a whole bunch of rules and regulations. But we don't want more red tape, but we just want, like, say, the big festivals, Victoria Park, Rock the Park, that kind of thing, to make sure those ones are accessible to all.
And so I think with that in the report back, I think taking a look at what some of the budget elements would be for these items on standalone and whether or not there's an anticipation of passing those on to the event holder, or if the city would be absorbing some of those costs, and how that might look. I think that's going to be useful to know for moving forward with our recommendations and guidelines, because I do see a difference, you know, with a small nonprofit community group that's doing a barbecue in a public park, not being able to meet all of those things. If we put in those requirements, what I don't want to do is lessen it, but I do want to create more accessible spaces. So I think we need to know that. We need to know if this is something that we're going to put on for-profit events, nonprofit events, and how we're going to support the implementation so that we can make sure to continue to have many great events that can be attended by all Londoners in the best way we can. So if that gives any more context as to where my mindset will be at in the report back, hopefully that helps.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I think my colleagues have covered the need for the referral, but I'd like to second it.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to refer item 4.1 from the 7th meeting of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. It's been moved by Councillor Squire and seconded by, it's a referral back to staff, and it's seconded by Councillor Armstrong. And if there are no other comments, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. As long as the wording indicates what Mr. Stafford indicated, that this will be report back so it can be put in place prior to next event season. I think that's a really important element of the direction from committee, and if that's included in the motion from Councillor Squire, I'd be happy to support it.
And we'll make sure we have that wording. Councillor Ridley?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm clear with Councillor Squire and the Mayor. So are you looking to report back and implement? Or are you looking to report back with information in time that Council could decide to implement?
The latter.
So we're working on that motion. Okay, the motion's on the screen. If you want to take a look, mover and seconder, before I call the vote. It's part A. Go ahead, Mr. Stafford.
Sorry, is the vote to be just on Part A at this point?
So Part A is the only part that's being referred back from what I understand. Is that Councillor Ridley?
Thank you. I maybe am making an assumption, but I think what Mr. Stafford is referring to are the other items where there's requests made. Specifically, I was going to ask a question in regards to the Complete Street Design Manual that went to Civic Works Committee yesterday. And so in here, there's a request for further action. And I wondered about the conflict. So I think that's what Mr. Stafford was flagging.
So it was my understanding that we were only dealing with item 4.1 at this point in time.
Okay, can,
So 4.1A is on the floor right now, and that is the item that is being referred. And if there are no comments or questions on 4.1A, we can call the vote on the referral.
I'm just going to vote manually yay.
Thank you. Councillor Sally is voting manually yes.
closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so the other action item on the Accessibility Advisory Committee report is 4.2A, and we do have Mr. McCray here to speak to committee if committee wishes to hear from him, because it's my understanding that the Accessibility Advisory Committee did work with transportation staff on this item. Councillor Ridley?
Thank you. Just flagging for you, I had some questions for the committee chair on 5.1. So I was hoping to have an opportunity to do that before you let him know that we were done.
Okay, so we'll deal with 4.2, and then I'll come back to you for 5.1. She has questions for you. Are there any questions from committee on 4.2A and the direction that's being requested? As I said, staff did work with the committee on this, and it's my understanding that there are no issues that were raised. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
I think just for the benefit maybe of the community and public watching, it'd be worth hearing an overview from staff.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. McCray.
Thank you. Through the chair. The development of the Complete Streets Manual is one that is very focused on accessibility, and we're proud to be at or approaching the finish line on that document. The involvement of the Accessibility Advisory Committee has been very beneficial. The document is better for it. The participation of one of the committee members in the workshop that guided the early development of the manual, Cash, it was very beneficial, and he provided a very unique perspective that no one else in the room could provide. So the manual is better for it, and the comment provided via the Accessibility Committee's minutes has been incorporated into the manual, and it is a good one. So it's been addressed. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Any other questions? Okay. So the motion as it appears in the Advisory Committee report is 4.2 A and B, and Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Ridley? And anyone willing to second that? The mayor? And if you have a comment, Councillor Ridley, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to do the rest of the report together. I don't see anything else that would be separated out. Happy to do that if that's how you would like to do it. But just reminding you, I just have a couple of questions on 5.1, but it won't change the direction I don't anticipate.
Okay, so we'll move 4.2 and then we'll deal with the rest of the report. And I will go to you, Councillor Ridley. Mr. Stafford?
Sorry, I just had a question about 4.2B. It's regarding the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So it's just the last point. It should be ensured that all Parks and Rec facilities are included in the FADS document. I just wanted to make sure with our facilities division, I know there's AODA and there's the Ontario Building Code that get met there.
Right.
And I don't disagree with the point before that the master plan should include the FADS
So
in the list.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
So part B of that motion from the committee just reads that civic administration be advised of the following comments. So those were comments that came up from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So it's not giving council any direction or staff any direction.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
So we have no more comments on 4.2. So I'll call the question.
Yay. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Selly has indicated that he's voting yes manually. Councillor Squire is voting yes manually as well.
Come on. Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. So we can put the rest of the report on the floor, and I believe Councillor Ridley is moving the entire report, and Councillor Armstrong is seconding that. Go ahead, Councillor Ridley.
Thank you. I thought I would take advantage of the fact that the committee chair was here, because when I read 5.1, I wondered where that came from. Was that an idea that was presented from staff to the committee? Was that an idea that came forward from the committee and you were asked for some input on? And if you don't have the agenda in front of you, what I'm speaking about is the Storybook Gardens wristbands and the recommendations that Civic Administration be advised that the Accessibility Advisory Committee supports in principle the idea of issuing wristbands to children with special needs who attend Storybook Gardens in order to communicate with staff that extra assistance may be required. So I just wondered if you could give me a bit more of the history there and what the plan is.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to clarify, I'm not the chair of the committee. I'm just a member that doesn't have a golf game or on vacation scheduled at this time. So that is why I'm here. Specifically with that Storybook Gardens, that was a great presentation. I believe Storybook Gardens actually approached us saying that they'd been approached by a parent just asking if it was available and wanted our feedback, wanted our input. And I think it was a great process where certain kids that instead of, with a parent with a disability, instead of having to explain to every single ride operator, every single operator, here's what my problem is, here's what my child's sensitivities are, maybe just a small wristband or something identified that the staff could pick up on that would allow them not to not allow them to have that conversation every single time. So it's a program that I guess they're looking into right now, seeing what other facilities have this and how they can move forward. So we really liked it and thought it was a great idea and want to draw more attention to it.
Thank you. I was very curious about how that came about, and I'm quite certain that any kind of implementation would be on an opt-in basis and not a mandatory or an expected, and that there would be no repercussions should someone choose not to identify their children, and perhaps they can have some type of concerns within the park or the playground area. I think that some disabilities are very visible and they're easy for people to say, okay, there's something going on there, I need to have some extra patience. Some are much more invisible, and the parents who manage those situations on a day-by-day basis may very much enjoy the relief of having staff who are trained to say, okay, there's something more here. I need to have some extra patience, but others may not want to see any kind of outward marker that other people may pick up on as a way to identify their child. So those are my comments on that. It certainly intrigued me when I saw it, and I know that before we got to an implementation stage that we would be reviewing a lot of that. So thanks for sharing the context.
Go ahead.
Councillor, those are the exact comments that we raised, and we were talking about it too, so you're very much on the same page that we're talking about. Sir Garns is the manager there who spoke to us, he was very much aware of those too, and that's why he wanted our feedback. So I think this process is going to be great, very positive, and hopefully we have good results.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, could you call the members of the committee to order? Sorry, I felt like I was making some significant comments and I just kept hearing voices to my right.
Can I have order, please? Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this report? No, I'll call the question now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And yeah, just a reminder, sometimes when you whisper, it can be really distracting to people, and the way sound carries around the curvature here. That's all. Just be respectful and considerate of everybody else. Let's move on to item 3.3, which is the Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee, the 8th report. And we have Ms. Kassar here. Go ahead. Okay.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Florence Kassar, and I have the opportunity of being the chair of the awards committee within the Diversity, Inclusion, Anti-Oppression Advisory Committee. The city's annual DREA award is fast approaching, and I would like this opportunity just to provide you with a brief refresher about the program and about this great opportunity of recognizing people in our community who are doing some great things. So just a little bit of background about the program. This is our 19th year that the program and the awards have been in place, and the primary purpose of the award is really to recognize initiatives that promote public awareness of diversity, race relations, and inclusivity in our community. You'll see below the nominations in the following categories, and these are the 5 award categories that are being recognized. Just to elaborate on the award categories, you'll see they're referenced under number 1 below, and basically they're broken up into 3 key groups, being small and large businesses, social and community services and not-for-profits, and then youth. The award eligibility for number 2 and 3 is really about sustainability. So we want to understand that the programs that they're doing or that are being initiated have been going on in the last 12 months, or the group as a whole. And then number 3 really speaks to what are the results you're starting to see, and are you really starting to see that impact in our community. From a nomination criteria, we really just want to make sure here that we have an opportunity to meet with the individual who's making the nomination, to provide some support and build that relationship within the community of the great work that's going on. Here's a brief overview of some of the past winners in the last 4 years or so. Actually, all of the winners are listed on the DREA website, and my presentation does have a reference there if you'd like to see all of the winners or just curious to know who they were of the past number of years. Our key dates, so just something I should have mentioned a little bit earlier. The awards the celebration itself is centered around International Human Rights Day, which is December 10th. So we try to hold the awards event as close to that date as a council meeting will hold. This year's event is a little bit earlier because of the changing council members. It will be on November the 20th. But you'll see the process. We have about 6 weeks to accept nominations. And then the recommendations that the subcommittee will recommend will go through a series of approval processes that you'll see. So I will be before you on October the 10th with our recommendations. And then just prior to the council meeting on November 20th, there's a small reception that's held and a presentation at council, followed by a small reception for those, not only the winners, but the nominations. And it's a great opportunity for networking within our community for those who do participate. Our ask is really to create awareness and assist us with the promotion of the program, your social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter. If you're out in the community, we have a number of tools and support materials available to help with the promotion. Our participation rates have been declining in the last couple of years, and as much as we hear about a lot of good work being done in the community, we're really looking to garner some support and recognition for this awesome award. Certainly not on this slide, but if there's any feedback on the program and how we can improve it, we'd love to receive your feedback as well. Just before opening up for any questions, there is contact information there. All of the information on the award is available on the website, and it's really as simple just referring people to the website. We've streamlined the form to make it a lot more user-friendly. And if you have any questions, there are contact information there for assistance.
Thanks very much, Ms. Cassar. And this presentation will be included in the council agenda packet, so all this contact information will be there for committee members. Any comments, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you for the work that you do. I know that your entire committee puts a good deal of time and effort into all of your initiatives throughout the year, and this is a very important one. I recognize that you're asking us for help to help communicate to the broader public that this award is in existence. It's been in existence for 19 years, and we want to see it continue for decades to come. I wonder, through the chair, if I could ask you to either email the city clerk or even my office with some information and background. We'll make sure that it gets out to all councillors, and we all have robust social media networks, and I'm sure that people would be pleased to include it in newsletters and also in social media posts as well.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we look forward to having a series of difficult decisions to make at the beginning of October, and I'll be happy to send you the information. Thank you so much for your support.
And if there, Councillor Ridley is moving receipt of the advisory committee report, and Councillor Sally is seconding that. And with that, I will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
So the next item, 3.4, is actually on your added agenda, and it is the 8th report of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. Okay, and we have Ms. Brown here to speak to that. Go ahead.
So we're requesting that city staff return the report regarding amendments to the London Animal Control Bylaw PH3 previously submitted by the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee by the end of August 2018 for CAPS and City Council consideration. As a private zoo business has stated its intent to and has reportedly been working to establish a facility in London. Based on the recommendations that we've already submitted, there were a number of concerns that we feel need to be addressed that were outlined in that recommendation. Concerns around public health and safety, concerns around animal welfare, and also environmental concerns. And also equally as important is municipal oversight to be able to ensure that all of those concerns are being addressed. So London has been a progressive city. We no longer operate the circus. Lickety Split Zoo has been closed. So I'm hoping that you will consider our request this evening so that we can take a really serious look at those issues. Thank you.
Councillor Sully?
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to ask the staff, was there be any issues with proceeding in the direction that the advisory committee was hoping to?
Mr. Kotsifas?
Through the chair, timing is an issue where we will not have a report done by the end of August. We're currently quite busy with some other bylaw enforcement matters.
So, Mr. Kotsifas, staff had already been directed to report back on this matter.
That's correct. Yeah, we were planning on doing it this year. It's just it just will not be done in August.
So is the expected report back last quarter, or do you have a timeline?
Probably at best it would be, I'm just guessing, but it would probably be about October.
Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was looking for a reminder from Mr. Kostifis. We received some comments a couple of months ago, and I understand that a draft bylaw amendment is what is coming back. Remind us of the process when that draft bylaw amendment comes back. Is there a further public consultation on that? Like, just so people have a good understanding of the timeline. I know you've already said we're not even going to get the report back until October, but I need to understand, and for other people to understand what to expect.
There was some proposed bylaw amendments that were brought forward to this committee through the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. That was referred to us, and it had a number of bylaw amendments pertaining to this subject matter. So what we would be doing is reporting back to you on our best, I guess, recommendations in terms of any bylaw amendments. If there were to be some bylaw amendments, we'd likely have a draft bylaw attached with that report. And at that time, it would be for your consideration and deliberation. It does not necessarily warrant a public meeting if there's no fees or changes to the bylaw, but the bylaw itself would come to you first.
Councillor Sully, I apologize. I think you were not finished yet.
I think that's because I was whispering earlier. My follow-up question was, I guess, I believe the circuses usually don't happen, I'm assuming, during the summertime. So I guess my question is to the advisory committee. With the timeline that you heard from staff, through the chair, of course, is that an issue? You know, I feel, of course, it's important for a sense of urgency, but I just would rather hear from you.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. So we feel there is a sense of urgency because there is a zoo-type private business that is looking to establish itself in the City of London. So we feel that timing is important because I think these issues need to be addressed prior to that happening. I think that that's why we're asking for it to be sooner than later, that some of those concerns, you know, they really have to be addressed because a large portion of that business is has that mobile component to it, where there are concerns around animal welfare in the process of conducting birthday parties in people's homes, health and safety issues, being able to assess and enforce those welfare and safety issues would be a concern. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, and thank you very much. And through the Madam Chair, I mean, I guess my comments to my colleagues is I'm prepared to move in the direction that the advisory committee wants, but I recognize that might not be doable, so I'll just continue to hear the conversation and see if I decide to bring a motion at that time.
Councillor Squire.
I'm with Councillor Slee, but the challenge is this. I'm still not understanding what this deadline date is. I mean, it's sort of nebulous. People are saying, well, somebody's thinking of setting up in London, and I get that, and they may do it, but are they doing it next week? Are they doing it in January? Are they doing it next March? Have they signed a lease for the premises? Like, those are all important things to know factually, because if we're going to rush a process, I really think we need to know that. It's almost like saying, well, this is an emergency, and here's the evidence to show it's an emergency, so we have to proceed on an emergency basis to get a bylaw passed. And I'm still not seeing clearly what's the drop dead date in terms of when this company is going to set up. Because I don't think any counselor at this table is going to know, sitting here, what is that date, and nor have I heard anybody say, here is the date.
Mr. Kotsifas.
Through the chair, so basically a company made a presentation to the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. They've indicated that they would like to locate in London as well. They have other locations in Ontario. They would require certain approvals from the City of London. In particularly, there's a zoning issue, which may or may not exist, but that's something we would have to work through. We do not have a formal application. Secondly, there's the animal bylaw that currently exists that doesn't permit certain types of uses. So they have not indicated any particular time. I think there are issues with respect to bylaw matters that would still need to be addressed. As such, particularly, I don't feel there's an urgency, but if I respectfully defer to the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee in terms of their concerns. But from my perspective, we do not have any timelines or as of yet.
So what I think I'm understanding is that even before they took steps where this new bylaw amendments may apply to them, there's other bylaw issues that they've got to overcome to open this business in any event. And certainly, how would that happen before October? I'm not sure how that would happen. They'd have to send out notices. So I'm with Councillor Salee. I want to make sure the consideration of this bylaw is there when this business sets up, whatever we're going to do, but I'm still not seeing that it has to be done in August. So that's where I am.
Councillor Ridley.
Thank you. I don't see any urgency. I'm more than prepared to wait for the information to come back from staff. In my perspective or perception of this issue was that there was no decision or direction from council. There was a request from a committee for staff to bring back information for us to consider at that time. So any discussion of moving ahead with a bylaw to me is more than premature. We need to understand the implications of a bylaw change from the perspective of our staff who will be doing enforcement from a business perspective, and we need to weigh that and give it enough time and consideration. So I am glad that people are happy to wait and don't feel a sense of significant urgency, because I think it's really important that we get the information back from staff before we consider any bylaw amendments and see what they're recommending or not. I recall that there wasn't, sorry, I'm just gonna go back to, there wasn't a decision that this was the direction that we were gonna move forward in. The decision was that we would get our staff to give us information that would speak to the request of the committee, and so that's what I think we need to wait for before anything else happens.
So I'm just looking at the report from the advisory committee, and the report is a request that civic administration report to the advisory committee regarding amendments. So, you know, given that they have a deadline in there that is outside where the timeline we're currently working on. I'm just wondering whenever we do changes to a bylaw, staff generally hold meetings with stakeholders, correct? So, Mr. Kotsifas, I'm assuming there's an intention by civic administration to have consultations with the advisory committee if there are changes made to this bylaw.
Through the chair or to the chair, absolutely, yeah. Typically, we would consult, and they will be consulted, but we just can't get there by August. We've already had some discussions, but an actual kind of recommendation or recommended approach, we're not there yet.
So I'm looking for committee, if we receive this report, the way it's worded is a request. If anybody feels we need to change that wording in 5.2A, I'm looking for a motion from committee. Councillor Sally.
And thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one more question for the advisory committee. I just wanted to kind of, because I know in the past we've had advisory committees come here and felt as if they weren't listened, so I just wanted to kind of touch base with them before we made a decision here today, and just kind of, based on the comments you heard here today, kind of where do you feel, you know, are you comfortable with the direction we're kind of heading today?
Yeah, because just to reiterate, what we had come here to ask about was having that staff report expedited to CAPS so that CAPS and City Council can consider it. So it's helpful to understand timelines, and it's helpful to also understand, you know, what are we looking at in terms of the urgency to make sure that we do things right before this type of business goes forward, right? So obviously we have no control over what the decision is, but we just it's really important that that we have some kind of timeline that might work so that we can do it right for our city and for animal welfare and for public safety. So thank you. Yeah.
And thank you, and that was very much helpful. I just wanted to make sure that you felt heard here today, so I'm glad to hear. I think for me, I'm supportive of what my colleagues have said here today. I think, you know, we want to make sure that if we do head in this direction, we have a bylaw that's been tested through our staff so that if it's challenged, it stands and, you know, isn't overturned, and then the applicants can go ahead and do what they wanted to do anyway. So I think that's kind of, I wanted to take that precaution by following this mechanism.
So speaking with the clerk, and we can receive the entire report, and we can change the timing in 5.2A from August 2018 to as soon as possible with, and the mayor's indicating that he would move that. So I just want to call committee's attention to one final item in the advisory committee report, and it's 5.3, that licensing in homes for pet-related services, and it's B, that civic administration be requested to report back to AWAC with respect to the feasibility of implementing AWAC recommendations. I will just ask Mr. Kotsafes on behalf of committee if there are staff concerns with that. I imagine that could just be dialogue from civic administration with the committee, and I don't see that as an onerous thing, but I'll hear from you.
No, not through the chair, not onerous at all. We typically send a staff person to the committee meetings, so dialogue is great, and we will endeavor to provide this information.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just before we vote on the motion before us, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to recognize members of the advisory committee here today. This is our third advisory committee today that we've seen representation from. It's the middle of August, and these are all volunteers. And so I want to say on behalf of really all of council, I'm sure no one would mind if I said this, thank you very much for your dedication. And we'll double your salary, I suppose, as a bonus for being here in August. But in all seriousness, you give a lot of time, and you share your talents and your passion. And I think that all of the advisory committees that have come here in the middle of August should be thanked, and that it should be recognized. We're treating your recommendation very seriously. We're making an adjustment to the timeline, but really it is expediting, and we'll do this as soon as possible.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sully, I believe you did second it, Councillor, so I apologize. My thanks as well. Thanks for coming, and thanks for the work that you do. It's appreciated. So we have a motion, and I don't see any further comments, and so I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And our final advisory committee report of the day is item 4.1, the 7th report of the London Housing Advisory Committee. And I do not believe that there are any action items on that. So Councillor Armstrong would like to move receipt of the advisory committee report. Do I have a second?
There are some requests.
Councillor Sali. So I note there's one small action item on there at 6.2, that civic administration be requested to make a staff person from the appropriate area available to the London Housing Advisory Committee when applications are being reviewed. And I just want to check with Ms. Daters-Beer to see if there is any concerns about that request.
Through the chair, no, we are generally in those meetings and available to the committee whenever needed, so that shouldn't be a challenge at all.
That's what I thought. Thanks very much. So we have a mover and a seconder. We have a seconder for sure. Okay. And so I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the deferred matters list. Any comments or questions on the deferred matters list? No, then I'm looking for a mover. Councillor Ridley, seconded by Councillor Armstrong, and I'll call the question. Councillor Ridley, Councillor Squire.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And we have one final item on the agenda, and it is the report back from the mayor that we were looking for following his meeting with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to point out that Mr. Cairns is still here. I had an opportunity on June 28th to meet with members of the advisory committee. Hello, how are you? And Ms. Madden, Mr. Menard, Mr. Cairns, Mr. Hawthorne, others were in attendance, and it was a very positive discussion. We spent well over an hour talking about the relationship that the advisory committee has with civic administration and with council. We identified, I'd say, a number of key areas that were creating points of frustration or concern for the committee, and from those discussions developed a series of steps that could be taken should council choose to move in this direction, I think, to address the working relationship between the advisory committee, between council, and between staff. Incorrectly, I've seen the list of items identified as demands. They're certainly not demands. That wasn't the spirit of the conversation that we were having. I would say goals is a better way to describe what's being asked for. You've heard already today that a number of actions are already underway. This letter is simply satisfying the direction I received from council to report back after that meeting. You can see that there are a number of items that could be done in the short term. There are some other items that will take more time, and the suggested timeline is 90 days. And then there are some areas for future consideration as well. What I'd like to do now is answer any questions that committee members have. I know Mr. Cairns would be happy to answer questions as well. And my request of this committee is to recommend to council that, let's say, the first 3 bullets listed under within the next 30 days just be enacted. I think those are things that can be done right away. And the remainder of the list be referred to staff for really a report back on timelines and implementation goals, so we can formalize that. And happy to answer any questions that people have at this point.
Councillor Sully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if the mayor will have this answer or staff will. I know I'm looking under within the next 90 days with the captions and some of those pieces. Do we know if staff will be able to achieve those? And some of the other line items that are coming up. I know YouTube has already their own captions, but I'm assuming that they want ours, which is kind of vetted through.
Mr. Stafford.
Just to echo the mayor's comments, we agree with the first 3 bullets, and there's probably some other bullets there too, but we appreciate the referral back just so that we can have a full chance to assess, analyze, figure out what things, and as was mentioned earlier, costs and timelines, and just to make sure. With what's gone on and some of the trust issues, and we just want to make sure that we we carry on in a really positive manner that's going on right now, and make sure that we can deliver on the items that we are able to deliver on. So we'd like just a chance to refer back, report back, and say some things that we've already done, some things that we can do in the future, and make sure we've got some accurate timelines and costs for those. So we'd appreciate that.
Go ahead, Councillor.
And just to make sure, because the mayor had the opportunity to speak to them, if the mayor has something to add on this, if he had something to add, or do you know if the advisory committee is okay with that direction that just was suggested?
I appreciate the question. I think that this really meets the spirit of our conversation, but Mr. Cairns is here, and maybe you wouldn't mind speaking to this as well.
We just wanted to thank the mayor for listening to us, and again, for the council to listen to us. We do like the direction. Again, we just want to reiterate, these are concerns that the council has actually already agreed upon. We're finally seeing movement on that, and that's what we're really excited to see. So I want to thank you very much for everything.
So I'll wrap up and say, I'm assuming the mayor will move the referral, and I'll second that.
Councillor Sully, I'm not sure if you actually got an answer on your closed captioning question. I'm not sure if Ms. Westlake Power is here to answer that question. Do you need it repeated? Go ahead, Councillor.
I was saying, I thought he kind of answered by saying they were going to report back, so that's why I assumed that then they'd know at that point.
Great, thank you. So, so the mayor's motion then is to go ahead with the first 3 bullet points and refer the rest of the letter back. So I just want to especially highlight the statement that the advisory committee is requesting that we read, because it is different from the statement we have been reading. So I want to make sure that civic administration is aware that the statement is different from the one that we have on our agendas. And perhaps, and my own suggestion is that we could put that in bold so that committee chairs like me don't forget to read it. And if it's in a bold font, then perhaps that will reduce the risk of forgetfulness. Any other, Councillor Ridley?
Thank you. I need clarification as well, perhaps from the mover and the chair. I heard 2 different things. I heard staff concur that perhaps the first 3 bullet points are easy to implement, but also request a full refer back. And then I heard yourself say refer back except for the first 3, which we would implement. So I just need clarification.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much. So the motion that that I'm making is that we proceed immediately with the first 3 bullets. And just for anyone listening or watching from home, that's that the statement be read at the beginning of each of the committee or council meetings, that a list of active motions and deferred matters outlining all former Accessibility Advisory Committee requests be developed. I think that that's something that can be done right away. And then the third bullet is to update the Accessibility Advisory Committee's terms of reference to replace associations of the elimination of hate with newcomers to Canada or multicultural. And I think those are potential items that could be done right away.
Councillor Ridley.
Thank you. So just on the third point, and that was one that I had flagged, I'm not opposed to changing it. I wonder if that's one that you want to refer to staff to get the right language in place. However, because what you would then have it read is one representative from newcomers to Canada or multicultural. I'm just not sure what that means. And so I think because there's not a rush, send it, they can do a scan of the landscape as to who the best representative organizations are. And then when I read the terms of reference, I understood the Association for the Elimination of Hate to be an organization. I do understand that it is perhaps an organization which is no longer around, so I understand the changing, but I just wanted confirmation on that, and I thought maybe referring that point may make sense.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm happy to make that change. So we'll implement the first 2 bullets in my motion immediately and refer this for the report back. Councillor, I thought you were going to ask that this be referred to your committee, and I thought that you know, that's an option as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Karen, sorry.
No worries. Thank you very much. Again, I'm kind of new to this. I'm just trying to understand the process here. You guys going to refer this back to staff for this? Is there a time frame on that, or is this going to go into the black hole where we had before?
Thank you, and certainly it's my expectation that this the report back come as soon as possible. I know that staff take this very seriously, as has all of council taken this seriously, and so I'm happy to include that in my motion as well to deal with this as quickly as we can. Mr. Stafford, if you can give us a sense of how quickly a report can be turned around. And again, this report will be very, I think, detailed in terms of what the direction would be, what the timeline would be, and potentially what the cost would be for each of these bullets, so that then we can make an informed and educated decision as we move forward.
Through the chair, I'm just afraid to challenge until we see the create the action items list and deferred list as to where we go. I think there's some items. I note the community gardens item. There's a report already being planned to come forward in the late summer, early fall. I think late September, early October. So some items will be coming there. I think until we see the creative actions list, I just don't want to speak for other areas and other divisions. It might be a more extensive report. Some I think will be very quick. I think what we'd like to do, or what we suggest, is that there's some items that maybe are already completed or just about to be completed, and there's some items that are kind of that mid-range project, much like you've done on the list and created your 30-day, 90-day. We're just not sure if 30-day, 90-day in our end of things is the right number too. So I think we can have a report back, and that report back may have some additional deadlines, timelines that go with that. So I think a report back in end of this year, by end of this year is a fair comment, and some of them will already have a list of action items that are completed or not completed, but I think that report back will have to talk about timelines for implementations and those kinds of things.
Mr. Mayor.
I can certainly appreciate that there's a good deal of work that will be associated with this. I think end of this year is a little bit too late. Respectfully, we're going to see a change in council on December the 1st. And so what I would recommend in my motion is that we implement the first 2 bullets. We look for a report back as quickly as possible, ideally sometime in September or October, and potentially an update as well between now and then to committee to just outline the kind of progress that is being made, because a number of these things are in motion right now, and it would be a shame, I guess, if we had to wait to get a report on some items where we're already making progress for the entire report to come forward.
Sorry, I'm just absorbing what you said. So, yes, I think that's fair to give a progress report, and then that report can include some of the other items that'll need further review or further recommendation. If we can go that direction, I think that's a direction we can produce the document.
1 second, Councillor Squire. I have Councillor Sully first. Councillor Sully is yielding to you.
Okay, I'm confused because we had a list of things, and now we're at a point of saying, okay, let's do the first two immediately, right away, which means in 30 days, staff is going to have an active motions list and a deferred matters list. And I thought Mr. Stafford said maybe that was too short a time period. And the other thing I want to just clear up is referring matters so they come back properly. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to get things right. And I don't think anybody in this building purposely tries to sort of delay things and not have them come forward. But there is a workload in this building, much of which is attributable to matters being sort of thrown over the fence to staff. So I don't want to get into this thing that, oh, we're going to put it off again and it's because we just enjoy putting things off. So I really want to clear that up. But I want Mr. Stafford really be clear. Can you do items 1 and 2 within 30 days and have them done? I assume you can, or if you have concerns, I'd like to know that.
Through the chair, I think that the creative action list is the items that are already in the accessibility advisory reports that we've had forward before. So I believe those items are something that can be created. It's trying to achieve those items and trying to figure out the costs and figure out the timelines of actually achieving what those items entail. Create a variety of different timelines and different departments that have to deal with them. So I think that's the biggest challenge going forward. I think the list can be produced, but I think the report going forward as to what the timelines, costs, and actual feasibility of implementing some of those items, I think that's where we run into the challenges.
I just want to try one more time. There's 2 bullet items in their report, and one is a statement that will be read before meetings, but the second says create an active motions list and deferred matters list outlining all former accessibility advisory committee requests. So what that's asking you to do is go back and create that list within 30 days. And my question is simply this: will you be able to get that done in 30 days? Because if you don't, somebody's going to say, hey, you were told to get something done and you didn't get it done. So this is why I want to be really clear on this.
I appreciate the flexibility. We'd have to work with clerks on that. If it's a target that council wants us to meet, I think we'll work diligently to meet it. But I mean, if we have to come forward with exceptions to that we've been able to achieve the last 2 years, 3 years, then that's what we'll have to come forward. But that's certainly what we'll diligently try and create that list. But then the challenge is certainly to, as I mentioned, to figure out what to do with that list and how quickly we can do it, and the timelines creates bigger challenges, and I can't commit to that.
Right, so the second bullet, if I can just intervene, is just, these are the motions that have been passed in the past, but yet haven't been implemented. That's it, and nothing further in that first bullet. It's not saying, when can we do this, it's just like, what's outstanding, basically.
That's my understanding of the second bullet.
So, and then the first bullet is really just up to us, committee chairs and the mayor, who chairs the council and SPPC meetings. It's slightly different from the one we do. There is one thing that we would need to change. It says contact the city clerk, and the statement that we read says, please contact accessibility@london.ca, and then a telephone number and an extension. So that's the appropriate contact as opposed to the city clerk. So I think we don't need to go through anything to change that right now and make sure that the appropriate statement is being read. So my understanding is the motion says a first 2 bullets we'll pass today, and the remainder of the letter from the mayor will be referred back to staff. Go ahead, Mr. Stafford.
Sorry, just one question as to where the list will be, where it needs to be. Is it a report back? Where does it need to be?
It's a request from the advisory committee. I think it can be delivered to the advisory committee at one of their meetings. I don't think it needs to come back to this committee or any other committee.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Ridley?
Thank you. And as per your comments, we are passing the first two bullets as amended, and by council, it will have the amended language.
Yes, I'm getting nods from the clerks. And we have a mover, and Councillor Sally indicated that he would second this. And if there are no other comments, I'll call a question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
And a few minutes ago, Councillor Armstrong indicated that he would move adjournment if there are no additional items from committee. Do I have a second? Councillor Ridley is seconding adjournment. All in favor? Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thanks, everybody.